We stopped for the night at a small roadside motel in the backcountry of Wyoming. The condition of the road was terrible, and I was glad to find at least some shelter. However, this evening, something was wrong. The winds were whistling so loudly that they rattled the windows, and the fog over the road seemed thicker than ever. I was a truck driver who had long been used to such nights, but something about this motel gave me an uneasy feeling. My room was small and dark, with a dubious smell, but I was too tired to notice. I sat down at the table and decided to check my plan for the next day when I suddenly heard a strange sound. It was like someone was trying to open the door to my room. I woke up feeling that something was wrong. My heart was beating faster, and I tried to listen to the sounds from the corridor. Nothing could be heard except for the constant wind rushing through the cracks. I got out of bed and went to the door, but it was locked. I lay down again, trying not to think about unpleasant thoughts. The next morning, as I headed out to my truck, I noticed that the back door of the truck looked slightly open. Maybe I didn't close them all the way last night. Maybe it's just my imagination. But what I saw inside left me in a state of shock. The cargo was partially unpacked, and inside were various mysterious objects. As I set off, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Maybe it was just the result of a little stress, but I couldn't ignore it. I stopped at the next motel, hoping that the new day would bring peace. But instead, I discovered that this motel also has its secrets. I got a room again, but this time at night I heard the same sounds, a knock on the door. As I was getting up, I saw something through the window, a silhouette running past. When I went out to check, there were fingerprints on the outside of the door, as if someone had tried to get inside. The next day, I set off, but the further I drove, the more fearful I felt. The road was completely empty, and not even the radio picked up any waves. Everyone around seemed to have disappeared. I pulled into an old service station to check on the truck, but came across another set of tracks, human tracks leading into the woods. I started shaking with fear. I decided to follow the tracks leading into the forest, not knowing what awaited me. The forest was thick and dark, and with each step it became more and more frightening. I came across a dilapidated room that looked like an old house. Inside were various objects that appeared to be of grisly origin. Looking at the floor, I saw pieces of old newspapers and photographs. One of them featured my truck. It was impossible, but it looked like someone knew where I was going. I felt someone watching me, and as I returned to the truck, I noticed that something inside had changed again. My fears were confirmed when I saw the car following me. She was in every reflection in my rearview mirror. I tried to pull away, but the car kept following. I had no doubt that someone was looking for me. I turned around and headed for the nearest track, hoping it would help. That night, I stayed at a motel, but the fear never left me. I heard another knock on the door, and when I looked out the window, I saw a dark figure walking across the parking lot. I hid in the truck, waiting for the danger to pass. But when I was leaving, I found something new again. A note on the windshield with my name on it. While driving, I noticed a pedestrian standing in the middle of the road, as if waiting for something. I stopped, and this pedestrian suddenly disappeared into the forest, as quickly as he appeared. I continued on, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like my trip had turned into a nightmare. I had to stop for service again. The station was closed, but the doors were open. I went inside, and everything was in complete disarray. My truck was opened again, and new items were found inside. It was real mental abuse. I found another note. You still don't know who I am. I was already so scared that I tried not to pay attention to these strange findings. Sitting behind the wheel, I tried to turn away from everything that had happened. However, every moment on the road only worsened my mental health. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, and that it wasn't just paranoid thoughts. During one of the gas stops, I noticed that my cell phone was missing. There was only one thing left for me, to find the nearest police station. I headed to the nearest town, hoping I could get help. But when I arrived, it turned out that the branch was closed for repairs and no help could be reached. At night, I stopped again, but this time I chose a place far from the road. I no longer trusted my usual route. After falling asleep, I awoke to the echo of a strange laugh coming from the forest. I got out of the truck and followed the sounds, but found nothing but deep silence and muffled echoes. My psyche couldn't take it anymore. I found a new note when I got back to the truck. "You can't run away from me." I decided I couldn't stay on the road any longer. At night, I tried to hide in a large forest, but by morning, things only got worse. The sound of cars passing by only added to my fears. On the way, I again saw the same car that chased me earlier, but now, when I tried to overtake her, the car suddenly disappeared. I stopped and got out but found nothing. I felt trapped, and the feeling that I was being watched only intensified. I headed to the gas station, and the moment I walked into the store, my cargo bay was open again. I was attacked by a new terrible find, a human photograph with a crossed-out face. I almost fainted from fear, but I knew I couldn't stop. I continued moving, although I could no longer see where I was going. The road was completely empty, and I had to stop to check if anything had happened to the truck. When I got out, I felt again that something was wrong. There were footprints on the asphalt that led to an empty house. I decided to check it out, but there was nothing inside except for a few old boxes that looked like they hadn't been touched in a while. After that, I came across a stranger who came out of the forest and offered me help. I felt it might be a trap, but I had no choice. The stranger said that he saw a strange car that stopped near the motel where I was staying. He offered to show me around, but I couldn't trust him. The stranger disappeared as quickly as he appeared. I returned to the truck only to find that everything inside had been turned upside down. It was already unbearable. I decided that I could no longer stay in one place and went further to a safer place. At night, I heard the same strange laughter coming from the forest again. I tried to distract myself by listening to the radio, but the radio suddenly ended and the air became an eerie whisper. I could feel my mind begin to crack, and fear gripped my heart. I was troubled by the thought that I might be part of some terrible experiment. The truck became a prison for me. I began writing down everything that happened to him, hoping for some form of organization to help me. But the notes and finds became more and more frightening. I came across an old sign pointing to an abandoned shelter and decided to stop and see what was there. The shelter was in a terrible state, and I found many objects that indicated that someone had lived here. In the corner of the room was an old photo of my truck, and on it was the caption, "The End of the Road." Tired and confused, I decided to go back to the motel where it all started. I felt that it might give me some kind of answer. But when I arrived, the motel was empty and no one answered my cries. I started finding notes again with my name and places I stayed. On the road, I saw the same car again. She was following me, and when I tried to stop and go check, the car was gone again. This was the last straw. I felt that my patience was at its limit and that I was really being hunted by someone. I realized that my problems would not end until I could figure out who was behind it all. Determined to find help, I set out for the nearest town. But on the way, I again came across the same camp I had been to before. All this reminded me that my life had become part of some terrible scenario. This plot can be continued up to 100 parts, developing the story with new terrible finds, intriguing events, and emotional outbursts. If you need to continue or introduce new elements, let me know. My fear had already reached a level where I could not distinguish reality from delusions. I stopped again for the night in an abandoned motel, hoping to find peace. But the night passed in fear. My dreams were filled with images of horrible people chasing me, and I woke up feeling my heart beating in a frantic rhythm. As I set off, I found another letter in the truck. This time it said, "You're too far to turn back." These were words that caused even more anxiety. I began to suspect that my past might be connected to what was happening now. I decided to stop at a gas station to rest a bit. But instead of a peaceful rest, I found another terrible element. A photo of my truck, taken from the inside, with some scary writings on the back. This again confirmed that someone was following me and had access to my truck. After getting out of the gas station, I found a forgotten path that led to the old bridge. I decided to check out what this place was. The bridge was in a state of disrepair and had not been used for several years. On its edge, I found another set of footprints, which were footprints leading to the forest. I followed the tracks, and they led to an old wooden house. Inside, I found notes that confirmed my fears, messages from someone watching me, and references to an old driving club it never belonged to. It turned out that I had become part of some dark plan beyond my imagination. I discovered that there were old photographs in the room with references to events that had happened a long time ago. I found some old newspapers with covers that reminded me of the crimes that happened in the area. It made me realize that my trip was not just a coincidence, but part of something much bigger and scarier. The night passed again in fear. I heard strange screams coming from the woods, but when I went to check, all was quiet. I again tried to find peace and continue the journey, but the feeling that I was in danger did not leave me. I came across an old hotel that looked abandoned, but when I went inside, I found that someone was still living there. They were strange people who seemed familiar and at the same time very suspicious. I could not trust them and decided to leave the place as soon as possible. On the way, I came across a small town that looked like it had been left in time. It was a place I had seen in old photos I had found before. I felt that there might be something important here and decided to stay to solve this mystery. I met a few locals who seemed to know about my problems. They told about an old legend about a driver who became a serial killer. It was terrifying. Everything I experienced seemed to be part of this terrible story. After speaking with the locals, I found another document that described the area as being used for dark rituals. It turned out that I had become part of an ancient ritual that connected me to these events. At night, I began to see images that could not be real. Again, I thought I was not alone and that something was following me. But when I checked, I found nothing. It was terrible. My psyche was already on the verge of breaking down. I continued my journey, but each stop became more terrifying. I met people who looked like part of my nightmare. They looked at me with horror and doubt, but none of them said anything that could be understood. Every night I heard strange sounds and saw strange lights. It seemed that something was constantly chasing me. I tried to use my truck as cover, but it didn't help. I felt trapped. I found an old book that described rituals and mysteries that linked my problems to something ancient and evil. This gave me a new suspicion that I was part of something that had been around for hundreds of years. I felt that I was haunted by more than just a person. Each stop became more dangerous. I found clues that indicated someone was following me and using my journey as part of their plan. At night, the nightmare happened again. I heard strange noises again, and when I went out to check, I found a new letter under the door. It mentioned that I would soon learn the whole truth. It made my fears even more real. I began to feel that I could no longer trust myself or my observations. The truck was opened again, and inside I found more marks that indicated someone was trying to drive me crazy. The feeling of danger was already so strong that I began to understand that I was on the verge of a mental breakdown. I had to use all my strength to keep my sanity and continue the journey. I came across a place that looked like an ancient shrine. I felt that it might give me answers, but when I went inside, I found only old ritual objects and an inscription on the wall. "You will find the answer in the dark." My journey became even more dangerous when I realized that part of my route was clearly not accidental. I realized that someone was controlling my movements and that I had long since become part of their plan. I found new tracks leading to the old factory. It was a place that looked like part of my nightmare. I felt that here could be the answer to all my questions. In the factory, I found a strange sign written in blood. He said, "The end is near." This made me even more anxious, and I began to feel that time was quickly running out. I was faced with a choice, to continue the journey or to turn back. I decided to continue, hoping to find a way out of this terrible situation. I came across an old camp where it seems it all started. In the center of the camp, I found a huge monument on which was written, "Only those who survive this journey will find freedom." This was the last test I had to pass. I found my way out of the camp, but before I left it, I learned the shocking truth. I was part of an experiment being performed on me, and now my path to freedom was just the beginning of more trials. After I left the camp, I set off towards the nearest town, hoping to find any possible help. My heart beat in the rhythm of fear and fatigue. I knew I was only one step away from revealing the whole truth. In the town, I came across an old library that looked like the key to solving my horrors. In one of the books, I found records of a serial killer who performed rituals on travelers. It confirmed my fears. I was part of his plan. I began to suspect that my actions were constantly being monitored. My attempts to contact someone who could help were always unsuccessful. I felt that my every move was predicted and controlled. I found in the library records of rituals performed in the underground tunnels located in the town. These records indicated that the rituals continued and now had a new victim: me. In the town, I met several locals who were behaving suspiciously. They refused to talk about the rituals and everything that was happening. I felt that I would have to solve this mystery on my own. I decided to check out the underground tunnels, hoping to find information about the rituals and a way to escape them. The tunnels were dark and scary. Every step was accompanied by unusual sounds and the feeling that I was not alone. In the tunnels, I found another sign. It indicated that the rituals were held at a certain time and that I was the intended victim for the next ritual. This made me hurry even more. At night, I heard strange sounds and screams coming from the tunnels. I found a cache and hid there, hoping that my hiding place would not be discovered. But fear and anxiety did not leave me. I continued to explore the tunnels and found old documents confirming the existence of a secret society that organizes these rituals. I learned that this society has a long history and that they control large parts of the territory. I came upon a man who looked like a ritual guardian. She revealed that I was part of an experiment and that my survival was part of a new plan. It turned out that I am not the first victim, and I will not be the last. I learned that the ritual being planned was not only to destroy me, but also to use my fears for further experiments. I decided to find a way to stop it before it was too late. I learned that the ritual is performed not only in the tunnels, but also in the city. It made me realize that my struggle was going to be even harder than I thought. I needed to find a way to stop this horror on all fronts. I felt that my actions were part of the society's plan. Every step I took seemed to be predicted. I realized that my survival was threatened not only by the company, but also by my own fears, which were becoming more and more real. In one of the documents, I found details about a sacred ritual that aims to restore the strength of the Fellowship. It helped me realize that I needed to find a way to destroy this ritual to stop them once and for all. I ventured into the depths of the tunnels, hoping to find a place where the rituals were held. My goal is to find the mastermind and destroy all evidence that would help continue this horror. I found the place where the rituals were held and was shocked by what I saw. It was a place of horror, where darkness and fear were intertwined. I saw societies use their victims to bolster their forces. To stop the ritual, I had to go through a series of terrible tests. I realized that this was the last chance to stop them and avoid my fate. I was preparing for the final battle. I found a way to destroy the ritual tools and documents used to control the victims. This was important to destroy their ability to continue their horrible practices. As I began to implement my plan, I realized that the societies were ready for the final battle. I decided that I must fight to the end to stop this evil. I received unexpected help from local residents who turned out to be part of the secret resistance. Together, we devised a plan to destroy the organization and put an end to its horrific practices. We learned that the next ritual would be the most terrifying. I went to the place where it was supposed to take place to stop it. It was a place where everything could end once and for all. As the ritual began, we began our attack. It was a terrible and bloody battle. I felt that it could all end at any moment and that our survival was on the line. I learned that the organizers of the rituals had secret plans that used my past for their own purposes. This became my last challenge, to stop them and unravel all their plans. After a hard struggle, I found documents that revealed all the plans of the society. I realized that their influence was much greater than I had imagined. It was part of a global conspiracy that had been going on for years. We stopped the ritual and destroyed the main tools of the society. But I felt that was just part of the struggle. I knew I had to be ready for the next challenges. I decided to leave the city and start a new life. I knew it would not be an easy task, but I was ready for a new beginning and to fight the past. Although I started a new life, traces of the past continued to affect me. I felt that the organization could come back and that I needed to be ready for anything. I continued to feel anxious and felt like the past could come back at any moment. I continued my struggle to secure my new life and find peace. The shadows of the past continued to haunt me. I learned that the societies were not destroyed and that their plans continued to exist. My struggle was far from over. I have found allies who also struggle from fellowship. Together, we began to plan how to destroy the remnants of the organization and ensure peace for all who were affected. I learned that the societies had another plan to regain their power. I set out on a new mission to stop them and ensure that this evil does not return. My new mission was even more difficult. I had to deal with new threats and use all my knowledge and skills to stop the company. My team faced betrayal. Someone from the inside started working for the company. I felt that I would have to fight not only with external threats, but also with internal betrayals. I suffered a heavy loss. Several members of my team were killed. It was a big blow for me, but I knew I had to keep fighting. I found a way to break into the society's main vault. It was a critical moment where I had to either stop everything or lose. I discovered the latest plans of the society and realized that their ambitions were even bigger than I thought. This was the last chance to stop them once and for all. My final fellowship battle was the hardest. I got to fight their best members and stop their plan until the final victory. The company fell, but I felt that it was not the end. I learned that their power is not completely destroyed and that I must be prepared for new threats. My struggle continued, and I learned that new threats were emerging. I had to find new ways to protect and fight this evil. I began to suspect that the remnants of the fellowship might have another plan. My mission was not only to find them, but also to reveal all their secrets. I learned that the fellowship was part of a great legend that had a real impact on my life. It helped me understand how to fight this evil. I started a new life, but the knowledge of the society and their plans always stayed with me. I was ready for new challenges and struggle with the past. I tried to rebuild my life and find peace, but I knew that the threat was not yet over and that I had to be ready for any development. I continued to struggle with the past and learned about new threats. My struggle was endless, but I was ready for anything. I realized that my fears could be part of an even bigger plan. I learned about new aspects of society and how they can affect my life. I found the last bits of truth about the fellowship and their plans. It helped me understand how to stop this evil once and for all. My final fellowship battle was the most terrifying. I had to stop them once and for all to ensure peace and safety for everyone. I finally won, but the losses were heavy. My struggle left scars on me for the rest of my life, but I knew it was my path to freedom. I started a new path, hoping that my new life would be more peaceful, but I knew that I would never forget those scary moments and would always be ready for any threats. After all the horrors I had experienced, I finally began to feel more at peace. I got a new job and tried to adapt to a normal life. However, I still had the feeling that evil would never leave me alone. One day I received a letter with an unfamiliar address. It was an anonymous letter that contained photos of places where I used to struggle with fellowship. The letter ended with a threat that the threat had not yet passed. I decided to check out all the places mentioned in the letter and found that they all looked pristine. This made me think that someone was just trying to scare me, but my fears continued to grow. I began to investigate new suspicious situations. My past continued to haunt me, and I realized that I needed to find those behind it. My investigation led me to old connections and contact with people who knew about the society. I learned that they may have new allies who continue their practices. I found new documents that confirmed that the society not only survived, but also expanded its contacts. This increased my anxiety and confirmed that the threat had not yet disappeared. I learned of the society's new plans, which included the use of new technology to control people. This became my new challenge, and I began to develop a plan to combat these new methods. I noticed that my behavior started to change. I became more suspicious and constantly looked for threats. It also affected my relationships with those around me, who began to notice my suspiciousness. I decided to find allies who could help me in the fight against new threats. I found several people who had experience dealing with similar organizations and could give me some useful advice. I began to use new tactics to combat the company, including new technologies and methods of intelligence. This helped me better prepare for the next steps in dealing with them. I learned that the society can have agents within the organizations with which I cooperate. This forced me to be even more careful and check all my new allies. One day I received help from an unexpected source. It was an old acquaintance who once worked for the company, but decided to help me in the fight against them. My new ally told me about another level of fellowship and their true goals. It helped me better understand how to proceed and what to do to stop them. I learned that the society uses false leads and disinformation to confuse its opponents. I had to learn to recognize these manipulations in order not to fall into the trap. I began to prepare for the final confrontation. My plan was to destroy the foundation of the fellowship and ensure that their plans could not be realized. I developed new strategic moves that included the introduction of new technologies to intercept information and fight against society. It helped me better control the situation and be prepared for all possible threats. I spent the night before the final battle, checking all the details of the plan and preparing myself mentally for a difficult test. I knew this could be my last chance to stop this evil. The final battle of the Fellowship was brutal and bloody. I used all my skills and knowledge to defeat them and stop their plans. After the final battle, I felt relieved but also tired. I knew this was a big step towards stopping the Fellowship, but there was still a lot of work to be done. I began to rebuild my life and look for new opportunities for further development. I knew my past would stay with me, but I was ready to start a new path. I continued my investigation to learn more about the remains of the Fellowship. I discovered new evidence that pointed to possible hidden cells that could still pose a threat. My past continued to haunt me. I felt that even after all the fighting and efforts, the threat could still return at any moment. I began to feel psychological pressure from the constant threats and stress I faced. It affected my health and relationships with loved ones. I decided to take a short rest to regain my strength and find peace. It helped me recover physically and emotionally. After returning to work, I delved into the investigation again and checked all the details that could help me learn more about the remains of the society. I discovered that new threats have appeared. It turned out that the societies had another group that continued their criminal activities. I began actively searching for information about the new group. My search led me to new sources and contacts that helped me learn more. I unraveled a complex web of contacts and connections that helped me better understand how the new group worked and how to deal with them. I was preparing for the final confrontation with the new threat. My plan was detailed and I gathered all the resources I needed. My final confrontation with the new threat was the most difficult of all. I entered into a battle that would determine my future and bring peace to all who were affected. The battle was fierce and exhausting, but in the end, thanks to all my efforts and determination, I won. I destroyed the remnants of the Fellowship and their plans, ensuring that this evil could do no more harm. This victory brought me relief, but also the understanding that the past will always remain a part of my life. I decided to continue my life, remembering what I have passed and to be ready for new challenges. Thus, my struggle was over, but I always remained alert, knowing that the peace could only be temporary. My story is not only about fighting evil, but also about the courage and determination needed to overcome life's darkest moments.